Greetings, good afternoon, good evening. Woo, what's it been? About a month now? This is Rootwork here on Black Liberation Media. My name is Thandisizwe Chimurenga, and I am here with Kali Akuno, co-founder, co-director of Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. We are here on this second Tuesday of August to continue the Build and Fight formula, the Build and Fight series that we've been bringing to you for several months now. Today is the topic of self-defense. Now, before we get all into that, we'll do some housekeeping. Please, 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 please like, share, subscribe. Share the link. Subscribe to Black Liberation Media. Subscribe to Jackson Rising. That's the channel of Cooperation Jackson. Subscribe to Rootwork separately from Black Liberation Media. Subscribe to all of this content. For all of the content that you've been getting and more that you can get, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like the videos. Make sure you share the links. And as part of this housekeeping, I want to holler real quick to the chat. Greetings, Yipper. Glad to see you. Thank you for chipping in. Hey, Manny Now, peace to you. Hey, Leah. Uh-oh. Leah, you doing too much, sis. You're doing too much. I'm not trying to tell you to choose, but I'm just saying you're doing too much. Yipper. The notification has not been working? Yeah, well, we don't own this technology. What can you say? We're doing the best that we can. Hey, Saturn, how are you doing? Thank you so much for tuning in. So, yes, today we want to talk about self-defense. Self-defense is, I want to say it's a favorite topic. It's a favorite topic among so much of the Black left because of how nonviolence has been pushed, shoved down our throat as more than a tactic, but as a way of life that we should adopt. And yeah, we're not trying to do all of that. But as part of the build and fight formula to transform society, self-defense forms one of those planks of that build and fight formula. And that's why Brother Khalid is going to talk about it today. How are you doing, sir?
Under the circumstances, personally, I'm doing well. um, but as we will get into this evening, I would be lying to everybody if I didn't say I was not the least bit concerned about where this empire is headed. And
Mm-hmm.
to this point, the tepid response to the advance of these neo-Confederates and fascists. So we got a lot to discuss on this subject.
Neo-Confederates and fascists. Yeah, I don't think people. I think people think that's a lot of hyperbole. I think people think they're all y'all just exaggerating. It's not that bad. Is it that bad, Kali?
It's worse than you think for those who kind of hold that position. Um, but before we get started, to get into it,
Mm-hmm.
because we will talk about how bad it is. Rest
Mm-hmm.
assured about that. But we also going to talk about some of the things we could and should and must do about it,
Mm-hmm.
starting on the local level, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why I'm pausing, it's two things that we would be remiss without kind of acknowledging.
Mm-hmm.
And when we laid this out and did the timing, it was not by accident that we landed the self-defense, the community self-defense portion of the Build and Fight Formula Education Series in August, because we wanted to make sure that we highlighted the Black August resistance tradition that our people have been upholding and maintaining now going on 50, close to 50 something. Well, no, if you go to 71, August 7th, 1970, excuse me, to be exact, that would be a total of 55 years from when Jonathan Jackson was killed, trying to liberate his brother and several other of our captives, from behind enemy lines on that day. And for many, that was really kind of the beginning of the Black August, commemoration of our resistance. And I stress resistance, not just like celebrating
Mm,
and doing all those things. This is a month focused on resistance. Let
mhm,
me just reiterate that one more time. So we wanted to highlight that and do this within the context of that tradition to really highlight. That's why the flyer even had the black, so you can kind of subtly get the cue if you didn't get it before. Other
mhm,
thing that we would be remiss in saying is August 29th will mark of this month, this year, will mark the 20th um, passing, let's say, of Hurricane Katrina and the damage that it did throughout the Gulf Coast, but particularly in New Orleans, Gulfport, and Mobile.
mhm,
And the 30th, August 30th, will mark the 20th passing of the Great Flood and the devastation in New Orleans. And we needed to
mm,
note those two and to put that squarely in everyone's mind, and really the connection that if we had time, we would go into in many respects. Uh, I think too many of us forgot the lessons of Hurricane Katrina, particularly in how the then government of George W. Bush totally abandoned Black folks, turned the National Guard and the local police against Black folks in New Orleans in particular, and allowed for vigilante violence, particularly over in the West Bank and Gretna, for folks to just be hunted down and killed. And only one person, after all the people who got shot, killed, and maimed and disappeared, only one person ever was held accountable for that.
mm, mm,
So, those of us who, uh, I wasn't in New Orleans, on the 29th or the 30th, but I was there shortly thereafter trying to put in work for a just reconstruction for our people, and witness countless horrors and terrors of which, destroyed New Orleans fundamentally, uh, as the city that we kind of all knew and loved. The city has been somewhat rebuilt, but it ain't the
mhm.
same place, and it's not the
Right.
same place on purpose.
Mhm,
And that was, I would argue, the link was to nullify not only kind of the Black presence and the Black vote, but the tradition of resistance that New Orleans, Black folks in New Orleans, was so historically known for. So we got to mention that before we get into all of this and get into where we are at, right? And so
mhm,
for those of you who need to be convinced, and particularly to those of you who, and I'm talking primarily to a number of Black folks who have been on these interwebs talking about Black folks should sit out this fight, particularly, what raised in Los Angeles, when Trump did one of his first major kind of exploratory probes to see what he could get away with, what he could do, how far he could push the limit, how much resistance he was going to face. There was, in my view, a self-defeatist argument that Black folks should not be involved, should not be engaged, because it did not directly deal with us.
mm,
As somehow we were not going to be targets of fascists, or somehow Trump, anybody who knows is Trump, you can just go back to uh, um, what was the Central Park Five,
mhm.
to know how deeply racist this uh, man, if we want to call him that, is, um, to think that he wouldn't come after us. And so I think it's timely, real timely, that we are doing this now on August 12th, when on August 11th, he decided to basically occupy DC, which many of us know historically as being Chocolate City, right?
Mhm,
Particularly you Parliament Funkadelic fans, right, would know good reference to that notion. Now, DC now is only, I think, about 45% Black. It's been heavily gentrified, like so many other major urban centers in the United States, this empire over the last 20 years. I think its population overall is still majority black, or at least the largest concentrated group of people in the city, even though it's only like 44, 45%. But in his mind, you can listen to the rhetoric from the speech that he gave yesterday. Every city that he named has either historic association with black folks, governed by a black woman or man, uh, or is somewhat still politically controlled by black people, not just Democrats, but black people. And so he made that very clear when he talked about not only he, and they didn't lie to us. That's the critical thing. He said very clearly, this is a test. Number one, for y'all, go back and look at his speech. He said that openly. This is a test. Number two, when this succeeds, and he was bragging and boasting about how competent he is, as opposed to all of us apparently are so incompetent, which he made known, like another just clear racist trope that he openly just throw out there. That he was coming for. I think he mentioned, I know he mentioned Chicago, he mentioned LA, he mentioned Oakland, and I think he mentioned a couple of other cities yesterday. So he's coming for you, those of you, those black folks who were talking about sitting this out. And that was only a matter of time. And I would have to argue with everybody here is that because of his victory in Los Angeles, and I'm going to tout that as a victory, he now, he knew that he could get away with testing the limits even further, and that he was going to open up, kind of the whole playbook piece by piece, section by section, over a gradual period of time. And why the gradual period of time? Why this kind of stunted release of things? Is very intentional. Again, them telegraphing from day one for anybody who cared to pay attention and listen, their flood the zone strategy. I'm going to keep you off balance, off your feet, and keep hitting you with blow after blow, day after day, so you can't necessarily concentrate unless you put yourself in a broader strategic framework and apparatus. You can't concentrate. And I got you. One day you're going to be fighting, to defend this, and the next day you're going to be fighting to defend that. And as long as I can keep different, I'm speaking as if I was one of them. As long as I can keep y'all fragmented, disunited, scatterbrained, then I can keep advancing what I want to move on. And at the end of the day, what Stephen Miller has fundamentally told us, and for those of you who don't know, that's the guy who's basically running the strategic operations directly within the White House, right? The chief of staff. That's who's really, I would argue, the chief executor within the actual office, moving Project 2025 and beyond forward. He's the one demanding all the quotas around how many people are going to be detained. And I stress people, right? Because they are rounding up folks, whether you have papers, whether you're a citizen, don't matter to them, right? And they've made that very clear that's a distinction without a difference to them, to use legal terms. Whether you are a legal U.S. citizen or whatever hell that means, you can be detained too, right? You can get the business too. And there are folks down. There are folks down in what they call in Gator Alcatraz, whatever the hell they call it, who are noted by some of the congressmen who went down and visited, who are citizens who are being held there without due process, right? Without being able to see attorneys or judges or to have a hearing, and who knows how long they will be there. So we need to come to grips on where we are really at. And if that wasn't good enough for you, today, Pete Hegseth, who's supposed to be head of the Pentagon, he basically, and I want to get the name so y'all can look it up. Let me make sure I get it right. The new Domestic Civil Disturbance Quick Reaction Force. And we pulled up an article. I want you to just pull up that article, Tani, that talks about that one in particular. And
Well,
I
which
want folks to
article
know
would that be, sir?
this is the one that says that they're coming after U.S. citizens. They're deploying a U.S. citizen. I believe it's the one from the Washington Post, the New Republic.
The New Republic.
The New Republic. This is out today. Trump plans military reaction force to use against Americans to be deployed in all those cities that I named and then some to quell resistance, right? To quell protests.
A disturbing new report reveals how Trump wants to use the military to crush civil unrest.
That's not your words. That's not my words. That's their words, right?
President Trump and the Pentagon are considering
piece that they put out,
creating a full-time domestic civil disturbance quick reaction force that could be called on to quash civil unrest and protests at a moment's notice, according to internal documents reviewed by the Washington Post. Man, is that big enough for y'all? Do I need to try and make it? You know how it is with this technology.
If you make it bigger, it would help, but I think most folks got it. And I would definitely encourage, for those of you who may be listening and not being able to follow this live,
let me see if I can take this.
Or some of the other rebroadcasts of this,
put it in the chat. Let me see if I can put the link in the chat, hopefully. The New Republic.
Yeah. So, one of the things I see in the comments that come from one of the pieces, let's address some of that right now. That said, sounds like self-defense must include awareness of this flood the zone tactic of the neo-Confederate fascists. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we will get to some of that. I want to just kind of go through, because time is always precious here, go through a few other pieces to really help us understand what's going on. So if you can pull up that article about ICE, I want us to focus in on that one, Thandi, and hopefully, those of you who are watching and commenting live, I'm sure most of you are aware of the expansion of ICE, from the one big ugly bill, the beautiful bill.
Is it the Guardian article or the Just Security article?
The Just Security. Pull up that one. And while Thandi is pulling that up, for those of you who are not aware, one of the key features of that big bill, there was a lot that was in there, which is ultimately going to be very destructive for the multinational working class that constitutes the vast majority of people in the United States empire. The dismantling of Medicaid and Medicare being critical. But there's so many hidden features within that, so many authorizations. One of the key ones being about basically ending the kind of the realm of jurisprudence that some of the federal courts, the circuit courts have in terms of dealing or curtailing Trump's agenda, and then basically hamstringing that, and then the Supreme Court backing that up. Those two were designed strategically to reinforce each other in terms of limiting the ability of judges, particularly federal judges, to issue injunctions that would temporarily stop on a national level, and once you dare say on an international level, many of the repressive things that the Trump regime has been pressing for. Now, I wanted to highlight this one, and I want folks to utilize this as a building fight formula resource. And I pulled up this one. This source usually has some pretty good information around folks to note it down if you're not familiar with this source.
The Just Security?
This Just Security on many of the kind of executive orders in their actual military impact and fiscal impact. So note it down. But one of the critical pieces that I really wanted to highlight around this one is the point that they're making that, should there be an election in 2028, and those of you who know me know that I've been saying for some time that I don't think there'll be a midterm election, and I don't think there'll be a 2028 election. We can get to that later. But should there be, it will be hard for any new administration, one assuming that it might be the Democrats, should things, the bourgeois order, hold in some form or fashion, and elections be quote unquote free and fair. Now, how free and fair they can be with the excessive gerrymandering that's already in place is always been a subject of question. But with the gerrymandering that they're for sure about to execute now on a federal level, in both by Democrats and Republicans, for folks to be clear, that's only going to tip the scale and the balance more towards open conflict, which is only ultimately going to be mediated by force. And for folks to be clear, and some of the things I put out, there's this old notion that comes from previous generations, the generation of the 20s and 30s that fought against fascism, about there kind of being a three-way fight, just to bring that up. Three-way meaning between, the fascists, the liberals, and the left. What we got now is not going to be no three-way fight in that regard. This is a contest between two factions of the ruling class. This is a fight between the neoliberals and the fascists about how to maintain and sustain American dominance and empire, and who's going to benefit from that. That's the contest, and be clear about that, because I think it frames part of the of how we ultimately going to have to position ourselves and understand who our allies are and who our allies aren't. And for those folks thinking that the Democrats are going to kind of run to our aid, I would just, just give you active instruction on, look at what's going on in New York City around this Mamdani campaign, and how Cuomo openly said that he had a conversation with Trump. They've been in some dialogue with each other about how to ensure that Cuomo wins the mayoralship of New York City. And it just further illustrates in real time how at the end of the day, the Democratic Party and the liberals would rather parlay and treat with the fascists than actually deal with the left. So think about that as you go forward in terms of what we mean by the application from below, from the left, about who we should be uniting with and why. And it is not these liberals. They can maybe be tactical allies here or there in a given location. But ultimately, as history proves, and the current example, I think hopefully illustrates very clearly, they will sell us out. So now that being said, going into a deeper analysis of how bad it is, y'all. Look, Trump and his regime learned from their first go round. We have to learn from his first go round.
I was going to say
we have to remember the lessons and not fail to regard what we knew and what some of this is going to take. Now, what do I mean by that? Number one, clearly January 6th was practice, right? And the failure to execute successfully on that has got them to this point of one of the critical lessons that they walked away with is that they could not trust what they call the deep state. And they could not trust, the command of the Pentagon, of the forces of the Pentagon, or the generals in the Pentagon. And they've been openly trying to dismantle what they call, again, the deep state, and remove all those generals who aren't fully compliant with the loyalty tests and all of the screening that they have to do to declare loyalty and to take the truth, the truth detector, lie detector tests. But even with their ability to do that, the U.S. military is a serious institution unto itself. And whether you ascribe to a left or right notion of the deep state, I would argue that if there is such a thing, it exists within the Pentagon and that structure. And that is not easily dismantled. His forces know that, chief amongst them being Steve Bannon. And how do you get around that? Well, you create a force that is loyal to you. You create one, right? Something that's going to be accountable to you. And that is what
Let me
I say.
stop you for a second. Let me
Go
stop you
ahead.
for a second. As president of these United States of America, isn't Trump already the commander in chief of the U.S. Armed Forces?
Again, let's go back to the lessons. The answer on the surface is yes.
Mm-hmm.
But for those of you who may not remember this name, remember and go back and look up General Milley, right? Who was the chief of, not the chief of staff, but the head of the I forget the office right now. He was head of the military during Trump's first regime.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by the law, the technicalities of the law during in November, December, and January, he openly violated the law and contravened the authority, quote unquote, of the commander in chief, i.e., the president, which at that time was Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just cite one case for folks to look up, right? Which is they've been downplaying, but in the lead up to his election, they were highlighting pretty significantly. One of the key things that Milley did was give a call to his counterpart in China, right? I believe that was in December, mid-December, and gave him the heads up and said, you are going to hear a bunch of crazy stuff in the course of the next month. Don't believe a word of it unless you hear it from me. Told him that. And I'm recognizing that this is rebroadcast in certain circles where a child-friendly ear needs to be held. So trying to stay with that. But he straight up told his counterpart, don't believe what Trump is saying, about going nuclear or there being some preemptive strike against China. Unless you hear from me, it ain't real. And the implied kind of stance, if you would, was I will not allow him, me nor the Pentagon will not allow him to go full on into some crazy irrational piece that neither the military wants nor is prepared for. Mm-hmm. We're not going to allow him to just create a crisis for his political benefit. That happened in real time. Go back and study and look it up.
Okay.
And what that clearly implies is that the military said, we are going to preserve civilian rule to the extent that we know a new administration is coming into office, right? Mm-hmm. That the Biden administration in this case was coming into office, one which they know from previous experience and difference in orientation and positionality would preserve the bourgeois order in the game as it's been played, right? Which would give the veneer that the president in this case would be in charge and that people like Milley wouldn't have to do these independent backdoor deals. And that's in theory how this thing is all operated. But he contravened, the authority of the president with that act, and then held and maintained, we will not, there will be no troops to come to your aid on January 6th, of which there were none. Right. And in part, another election from January 6th, Trump was the one who was responsible at that time. And let's bring it home. What he just did yesterday, he could have did on January 6th. Everybody to be mindful. He could have taken over all of the different forces in D.C. and deployed them to stop this rebellion. He chose not to. But he had the same authority as the president did, and he's now claiming that he's going to exercise now, to take control of D.C. and to stop all the crime. he had the same legal powers then, the same constitutional powers then that he could have employed. He didn't. So, you know, again, us being mindful of history, learning from history, and learning from that particular piece from his first administration of what he could do and what he didn't do, and then what different forces at various points of time could have done but didn't do, or you know, didn't do to really put him in check. So there's a lot of things that we need to learn. Now this go around, by putting Hegseth there in particular, he ensured that at least somebody who is not going to challenge him in any fundamental way, and will execute whatever he wants executed, is at the helm. Now, if it all plays out that particular way, given some of the internal infighting within their own coalition, kind of remains to be seen. And I'm saying that because I do, and I'm gonna say it here, they are going to be under some extreme stress in a couple of months once the tariff regime truly kicks in and it starts to wreak major havoc on the U.S. economy, particularly inflation and the curtailment of trade on a global scale, right? As folks, because right now, you know, the capitalists themselves do not know how to plan. Let me repeat, they themselves do not know how to plan. And for all this talk that you hear about, you know, the free market and the logic of the markets, Ford, GM, Apple, Walmart, all these folks have small scale planned economies. There is no way that you can operate without scale, without planning months, if not years in advance. And if you don't know how much your supplies are going to cost, right? You cannot do that much planning in advance. You curtail your spending when you don't know. If I go to you know, the factory, am I paying, you know, $20 per part per nut, or am I paying 40? Which, you know, what am I walking into when I walk into today, and how can I barter in trade on an international scale if I'm not clear what the rules of the game are and who's actually in control of the mechanism? And if it's just one person who's in control of all the mechanisms, what type of tribute do I have to go pay to him to give me the okay to spend the money I need to spend to, you know, buy this note, you know, and rivet to be able to put in this car to be able to put out as a consumer product? Then I don't know how much I'm actually charging for the consumer product is, because I don't even know what my overall productive cost is. So that's a major crimp in the game of how capitalism in its present form works and operates, which he's very mindful of, he's very intentful of, and it is going to create, you know, a certain level of just chaos. And chaos, again, is what this flood the zone is part of what he wants to kind of bring the world economy to heel, believing fundamentally that even though the U.S. is not the strong economy that it once was, say, 50, 60 years ago, it still has the overwhelming kind of military might. Now, that doesn't mean it has the wherewithal to win a number of engagements. Now, I say that because, you know, the United States didn't win in Vietnam. The United States didn't win in Afghanistan, which Trump was, you know, also in part presided over. What it can do is do an inordinate amount of destruction to any society, right? Of which Gaza is the preeminent example of. And stop thinking of that as just like a Zionist trip. That's a U.S. is carnage within itself, right? Those two go together and serve your mutual purposes with each other. But the critical thing, and then we want to move on to the prescription, Tanya, unless there's some more questions that you want to ask. The critical thing is for us to understand, you know, Trump got with that you pulled up, he got a total of what was it, 160 billion for ICE to spend over a 4-year period. And I think that's the piece that sometimes is missed, is about how much money that is going to be spent And many people have brought out the fact that that is larger. ICE's budget is larger than the entire Russian military budget. To put that in perspective, it's larger than the FBI, and several of other those alphabet repressive forces put together. And they just eliminated the age requirement. You do not have to have a college degree. They eliminated it both ways. So it can be as young as 18 and you can be over 37, because it used to be a cap in there for them wanting kind of the most, fit and able-bodied, primarily men, but not exclusively, to be able to apply for those jobs, because they wanted folks in their physical prime to be able to do as much damage to another human being as possible. Let's be clear about that. But they lowered it. And the reason that they lowered it, number one, they are having some problems in recruiting that they mentioned. But the other one is, they want to make sure that all of the various brown short forces that they pardoned and to a certain extent have been deputizing on state levels since Trump got in office to be basically, slave catchers, that they can now be justly rewarded for the punishment that they are being promoted to inflict. And they're being very clear about what they're doing. Like the latest promotions for ICE is protecting your culture. That's what their promotions say. Do you know, sign up to protect your culture. Now, what culture is that? Right? The melting pot culture. Not that I'm a believer in that, but that's part of their rhetoric that we all would propagandize with. They clearly abandoned that, and I think it's very clear. It should be very clear. They're promoting a white supremacist culture and eugenics, and that is an open promotion of that, of who they're trying to attract and what they're aiming to do. So this is how bad it is. Let's be clear. And they've done the tests. They're extending that. They fully aim to execute. Part of one of the things I've told several folks is I think from when they got those resources on July 4th. Got it approved. That's when the one big beautiful bill was signed into law. So that's over a month. And I'm putting this out so folks understand at least my reason, and you can argue with them that we need to struggle, in a way that's steel sharp and steel, to be as precise as we can be in understanding what we need to do and how we need to move. But it's my own personal analysis that from July, that they basically had about 5 months by which to kind of get that force completely together. Now that 5 months, if it would have been July, would have put that into trying to have everything in place to have a fully capable force by December. Now, why was I saying that, and why am I putting that out here? Why December? And why this timeline? If you want to ensure that there are no resistance forces able to mount a charge against you shutting down the midterm elections in 2026, you need to have your repressive force in place in ample time to be deployed, particularly in all of the major cities that are Democratic havens, are going to be the key sites of resistance to your policies and orientation. And you got to have enough muscle to be able to go in and when and where a local force, be it the local sheriffs or the local police, should they not comply, should they not collaborate, that you have enough might and muscle to be able to countervene, to put them not only in check, but to execute the Sumeric takeover of those cities without any resistance. These things, we got to think as materialists, these things take time to both amass resource, because you got to remember, they have to gear up. It's not like the United States has any lack of gear that they could just redistribute already. But, they like to buy new things because that's a stimulant to the economy, particularly the U.S. being a war economy. They like to they got to buy all the new guns and the new gadgets and the new little Humvees and trucks and tanks that they're going to deploy in our cities. And best believe they're buying all that stuff and ordering it now. You got to bring people on. You got to give them some basic rudimentary, kind of recruitment. You got to put a command structure in place. And then you got to figure out your deployment and then what the parameters are. Mm-hmm. So that's going to take a little bit of time for them to put together. And the other piece of why I was saying this is so timely, if I'm right, and believe me, this is not something I want to be right on, but if I'm right in any remote sense, we have between now and the end of the year to figure out how to effectively challenge this and start to work to do all the work on a local level to dismantle this apparatus and to hinder it from being built in our locations, or at least for it to be fully institutionalized to such a degree that we won't have any capacity to fight back, at least in the immediate sense. So that's where we are, right? It's not a pretty picture by any stretch of the imagination. But it's I think I would have to say, based on all the evidence that's been put before us, I've just displayed a small sample of what I would call evidence with the things I've cited around what they're doing. There's far more that we just don't even have time to go into. These are just some of the more openly egregious points that are open for discussion, but they're doing a whole bunch of other stuff. Like one that's not even really a public order. The one thing they're talking about, they're going to reauthorize the U.S. military. This one came out a couple of days ago, last week, I believe. They started talking about this Friday. At least I first started to end up that they approved the U.S. military to go after drug cartels and to do operations in other countries. And how I first heard about it was the president of Mexico. Basically, she came out and said, "Ain't no way in hell that's going down in Mexico, right? Not under my watch." And then, folks started me and I know some other folks started like, well, what is she making reference to? And that's what it came out of us digging and other folks doing some good media about this order. And I'll send some stuff out on the Build and Fight resources to highlight that in this order. So that's just the beginning of a number.
Kali, it's 4:45, Kali.
Yeah, let's go.
We have not talked about self-defense yet, Kali.
Sorry, we dealing with making sure that the sound is good. All right, folks. So look, I think it was critical to go into that, not to be kind of long-winded, but I think your question was good.
It's 4:46.
One of the critical things that I want to cite, it was produced some years ago, a piece I wrote called "Let Your Motto Be Resistance." That was about community, defense, and that was written for a slightly different time on a different set of conditions. But many of the fundamental basics that you will find in that pamphlet, and we'll make it available. You can find it on Navigating the Storm, which is my old blog. You can find it there if you just look up "Let Your Motto Be Resistance" or do a Google search. Many other comrades have also picked this up and put this out. And hopefully, there are some good, useful tools in there. But some of the critical pieces of where we have to start on the local level is being clear about, from the scaffolding around the Build and Fight formula, is the whole point around initial articulation around self-defense there is recognizing that if we are building, and as we are building viable alternatives and doing our own productive work, building our own capacity, feeding our own people, producing our own goods, producing our own services, and then trading those in a far more democratic route, that alternative is going to be attacked and threatened, with or without a fascist dictatorship. The neoliberals would attack it just as hard as the fascists would. People need to be clear about that. So there was always going to be a need, and always will be a need, in terms of building an alternative to make sure we have the capacity to defend it. Now, under this particular set of circumstances, the fact remains, some of the critical things we need to do. You got to raise consciousness with your family, friends, and neighbors as a starting point to bring the analysis of where we are at. You can frame parts of it within kind of a rights framework, but I would caution everybody, do not limit yourself to that, and to bring folks into a clear analysis around power, because that is where we are operating and fighting against raw power. Trump is going to contravene the law, violate the law, break the Constitution, all of that because he can. And because that's what he wants to do to get to where him and his backers want to go. We have to understand it and recognize it. We want to do things, I think, from a perspective of justice within a human rights framework and human rights articulation of what possibilities should be available to us, right? And what rights we should try to uphold, but not be limited by our imaginations and thinking that our enemy is going to respond to us with kindness or fairness or within the context of the law. They are not. Making sure our people are clear about that as a prerequisite of what we need to build in self-defense is key. Now, the other piece is, being real. This is a time when we need to be clear that folks need to be training in all of the martial arts. The physical martial arts, i.e. the hand-to-hand piece, to the extent that you can do that, do it to the greatest extent possible, but do not do that alone. Do it in the community. Practice with other people. That's, again, an organizing component. And then the other part is training with weapons. If you're going to get weapons, and everybody who's listening to this, I would encourage you to do so while it is you still have the capacity to do so, while it's still legal, while there are things that are accessible. But again, you need to train sufficiently in order to be able to use that to defend yourself in your community, and make sure that you know how to use all the equipment that you come into contact with, right? It doesn't do any good to have certain things and you don't know how to use them properly. You can be just as much of a danger to yourself and to other people before you could even defend yourself. So make sure you do training. And again, optimally, do not do those things alone. Build a unit that has some capacity to move together in trying times on a local level, right? Then you want to set out some parameters of communication, because you're going to need to be able to communicate not on channels and not being reliant upon, the cell phone networks, which we don't control, right?
Kali, are you referring to this slide or not?
I went beyond that. I'm just trying to speed some things up, Thandi.
We can go to 30 after. What am I doing here to help?
You can go to the next slide. You can go to the next one.
Education initiatives?
Yeah, the education initiative is what I was speaking to.
Okay.
Critical things that I was touching on that we need to fundamentally do in our community to raise this level of consciousness and get us to this particular point. Some of the critical pieces, when and where possible, starting on the local level. And we want to start on the local level because that is where, in truth, the more organic relationships with all the different forces that exist have the potential of their forming coalitions. And what do I mean by that? In certain communities, like in Jackson is small. A good number of the police force is overwhelmingly Black, and a good number of them were born and raised in the community. And a time like this, that can be an asset. And the asset in the sense of, people may know, or different people in the community may know who they are, can dialogue with them, kind of get training, grab information from them. Also understanding that they still have an obligation to the state, so do not expect them to give you any and everything. But a good number of them we know are not in line, particularly Black and Latino ones in particular, not fully aligned with the fascist regime that the MAGA movement is pushing. And there's going to, at some point, have to be a break between them following unlawful orders and them making some choices to defend itself. That only gets more accentuated as we get organized and pressure different forces like them in our community to make a clear distinction and to draw some clear lines. And if we are the ones who are pressing them to do that, it puts us in a better position to dictate what those lines of agreement may be, where those fault lines will lie. We should not rely upon some external force to do this type of political work. You don't know what the message is going to be. You don't know what the politics and the orientation is going to be. This requires us to do that work. We want to secure any type of safe kind of operating parameters within any kind of respects. Now, another thing I just want to key in again in the effort of time, the essence of time, when you are thinking about what type of kind of tools to get, I just want to put a caution out there. You know, there are a lot of exquisite things, a lot of different calibers of things that folks utilize and want to get a hold to that are some are fashionable, some pack more of a wallop. I want you, what I would say, to be strategic and go with the things where you know there's going to be ample supply of ammunition, because a tool, you know, these weapons are only as good as the ammo that you either have on hand or you can secure in some particular way. And if things get to a heightened state, of which I think they will, you know, bullets and things of that nature are going to be some of the first things along the line of production that they're going to curtail. But you need to then have access to what is available at hand, understanding where the stores of supply exist in your community, most of which are going to exist in and around police departments, training facilities for the National Guard, or if you're around a military base, around those. So weapons that they use or should be things that you should be kind of gearing up to also use for that particular reason, to have access when and if other supplies run out. So just kind of keep that fundamentally in mind as you and yours are beginning to kind of think about organizing, training, and developing your capacities in your community, you know, to move. But remember, this ultimately, what we are pushing is not some of it's not a prepper orientation. Now, there are a lot of things that preppers will teach you, of which there's a ton of that out, which is why I'm not going to repeat that. I will cite you some sites, you know, websites and things to go to that I think are helpful, that you can learn from. But ours has to be a collective orientation to the extent that we can do that in a secure manner. And I stress a secure manner because we should expect, particularly from here on out, particularly after this kind of articulation, what this country has always done, which is try to infiltrate our forces, infiltrate our communities, disrupt them, send agent provocateurs into our spaces, into our organizations, into our movements to provoke conflicts. You want to try to avoid that. That is why starting on the local level with folks that you know, folks that you have a history with, that you have some relationship to, is the first and really the only way that you should begin building this, and not just kind of a random assortment of people that you can't do any background on or don't know their history on. You got to do some convincing of those. That's why I started with that, of those within your network, to make them come to some particular conclusions about what needs to be done in the here and now to fortify ourselves, our communities, and to be able to survive and withstand this fascist onslaught, which is here. It ain't just coming, it's here. And to see this through right to the other side. Because I would stress, and then I want to end and open it up to questions. You know, as bad as that picture was, that was painted, and as crazy as everything is getting, we need to again recognize this is being done out of desperation on their part. I'm gonna stress that, out of desperation on their part. Right? If capital had some clear plans on how to extend the benefits that have accrued to their core populations from the capitalist system, that they would not be resorting to this level of extreme violence, not only in the United States, but on a global level. Right? Fascism is on the rise on a global level, and it's because of the deep crisis of the capitalist world system. Right? And if they had some more plans, if they had some more vision, they wouldn't be resort to this kind of hunkering down mentality, this survival kind of mentality at all. Now, things in forces, animals that are in deep desperation, as we know, you put something in the corner, you trap it, it's going to come out fighting out of sheer desperation. That's where they are at. And so we should not lose sight of that and have to articulate it and to build through concrete practice kind of a new vision and orientation. Thus, this series is kind of a contribution towards that end, that a new future and a new set of relations, a new way of things is possible. It's been blocked, it's been hampered, it's been stymied, so that those, who colonize the earth can continue kind of ruling and keeping things under their kind of sole possession, but they're losing their grip. And they're acting desperately. Our job is to make sure that not only that they lose their grip, but the damn hand gets cut off eventually. So that is up for us to do. It's a lot more that could be said, could be outlined. We'll definitely, supply everybody with more resources in the course of the next couple of weeks. But take this effort in the here and now going forward of defending yourself, your family, your community seriously.
All right, so I just want to run through this real quick just to read them. And somebody asked about the PDF of these documents. Kali, I'm sure you'll provide us with a link to where it is.
Yes.
But self-defense, strategic goals and how we reach them, self-awareness, self-reliance, community aid and accountability, and mutual aid and community accountability, educational initiatives such as Know Your Rights, human rights workshops, security workshops, intelligence gathering, self-defense workshops, security workshops, emergency response, formations, black committees, neighborhood councils, city councils, elders councils, youth councils, survivors of family councils, women's councils, people's assemblies, people's tribunals, getting organized into formations, cop watch, security teams, militias, emergency social response teams. Um, there's been this thing on the internet about these white folks having their all white communities in Missouri and Arkansas, and it's probably going to be some other places. And I was telling people, in my little Facebook world, Facebook friends, the issue for me is not that white people want to separate from black people. I don't care, and we don't care. The issue is that they can't keep their hands to themselves. At some point, they always want to go out. It does not bode well for the safety and security of black people. Never has and never will. And that's just a small example. We got the the U.S. government to be concerned with. But as you talked about with ICE and etc., the deputizing of a force, not even loyal to the government, loyal to Donald Trump. These deputizing of these, lowering these requirements to be ICE agents. Where are the true? We need some true heart from the heart spooks. Where are the true spooks at? The true spooks who understand what time it is, go to the enemy, get the skills, and come back. We keep going to the enemy for a paycheck and staying there. We get paid time off, annual leave, we get sick leave, we get bonuses, we get promotions. We like being up under the enemy. Where are the spooks at that's going to get some training and come back? Where are the Geronimo G. Joggers, the paratroopers that's going to come back and say, I got to teach these people how to shoot?
There are a few of them around. There are a few folks.
We need more. We need more.
Oh, absolutely, we need more. I mean, down here in the South, there are a good number of black folks, men and women, who've gone through Marines, Navy, Army, who've got trained.
Okay. That's nice. I'm in LA. I need help.
Well, I think there's a way of finding some of them, and I think, getting them to be directly involved and start doing more open trainings. I think the piece right now is that so many people are operating in fear and don't want to speak out, and a good number of folks are still shell shocked. I find that deeply that so many people are surprised by how fast it's changing and don't know what to do, right? Or claim that they don't know what to do. And I think part of the issue is, a good number of folks, I think, in their heart of hearts, know what needs to be done, but are kind of waiting for somebody else to take the charge and to take the initiative. And
We are
that
the
is
ones
born
we've been
out of
waiting
a
for.
fear from what happened in the 60s and 70s. Let's be real about that, right? About, particularly in the Black liberation movement, uh, uh, going back to making the link to Black August, we still got a few, far too many, one too many, two too many of our political prisoners and prisoners of war behind bars for standing up and fighting back. And uh, we know the fear that the community wind up living in of folks having a certain amount of praise for the Black Liberation Army or certain sectors, or praise for the Black Panther Party for self-defense, but they're also side of, baby, y'all don't do that. They're gonna kill you or they're gonna do that. That still lingers with us.
Yeah.
In a number of different ways, and we haven't fully, been able to recover from that type of psychological warfare that was used against us and often spread in our own communities. We got to
Yeah, I
be
have to say it gets
real
passed
about that.
down. It gets
Yeah,
passed down. Yeah. Yeah.
we got to be real about that.
Hmm.
And we got to recognize, it's not like I'm not as older I get, I'm not condemning our folks for kind of spreading that alone, because as you just noted, the United States is soaked in blood, every square inch of it. And somehow there's what's one of the things that's most remarkable to me is that there's some perception that I even hear Black folks, at least liberal Black folks, out on the TV talking about CNN and MSNBC. They act like 1965 to now, that 60-year period, that's
Hmm.
only 60 years, like that was the norm throughout most of the history of this empire. That was a blip,
Hmm.
right? This was a short little blip where there was some attempt to humanize this society on the heels of the mass resistance of our people, of indigenous folks, of Chicano Latinos, Puerto Ricans, all the different struggle that we waged, from the end of World War II, roughly, I would say through the mid 1970s, that carved out a little bit of space.
Hmm.
But the forces of white supremacy and the capitalists, they accepted a few compromises, but they was never satisfied on us having quote unquote rights and making certain gains. They never settled for that at any point in time, and organized over a 50-year period to get to the point of where they are now. Of just, I'm gonna take this out. Y'all don't need no Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court about to get rid of that. In the
Hmm.
next couple of weeks.
Hmm.
They're gonna get. But we keep acting like, or there's this notion that uh, this ain't what this place always has kind of been to a certain degree, and
Yeah.
why we have to kind of, a part of our critical piece is to be clear, is for those of y'all who still have elders in your community, folks in the, I would say at this point, 70s and 80s, that you can talk to about how our people in our communities survived and organized, right?
Hmm.
Under the conditions of American apartheid, which was, the more homegrown form of fascism, how people did that. And then out of that, how people, built the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, what it took, what type of organizing and infrastructure and resource generation, what did it take? And I'm talking about methods that do not rely upon the nonprofit world, the nonprofit industrial complex and philanthropy, because Trump is cutting that off too, right? And we're going to have to find ways to fight back without having command of those resources. To the extent that folks who are listening to this may have access to them now, the challenge is to figure out in the time you have remaining with those, scant resources, how to deploy them in the most strategic manner. For when they get cut off, you can still organize, you still have things in place for people to move and to fight back. That's one of the critical tasks that I think we got with this time frame remaining. Again, I'm gonna put out, we need to make some critical moves by December. And I'm not trying to raise that to be alarmist, but just being clear about if I'm right that he's creating his own domestic army. At some point, we know it's going to be deployed. They've already said they're going to deport 1 million people per year. They've already said, and that's a minimum of what they want to, what they claim that they want to do. They've already said that they're going to start moving troublemakers, domestic troublemakers, i.e., me, you, and people like us, to El Salvador and to these
Not
concentration
me.
building.
Not me, sir. Not me.
I hear you. I'm with you on that. That's why everybody who's listening, we need to take this seriously and start organizing. And if you've been doing some of this work, extend it out, train new people, build broader networks, and get prepared first on that kind of local and municipal level, because that is where we have the most ability to kind of exert a certain level of both influence and command and control operations to defend ourselves, because unfortunately we don't have a left that is organized on a national level to fight back, say like the Communist Party was in the 1930s. We're not there. So we got to pick up the pieces with what is available, which is far more small, more fractured, not as ideologically coherent, but we got to work with each other on the tangible pieces, on the practical terms, to get us to the point of where we need to go in a very short time frame.
So David Cobb, who's part of the People's Network for Land and Liberation, we had him on the show last month also. He has three suggestions he's put forth, and I'm sure they mirror what you've been talking about. Pair protection with political education and mutual aid, because safety alone doesn't shift power. Build disciplined, trained, community accountable formations. Avoid ad hoc vigilantism, and know the law, especially around firearms patrols and public assembly, to prevent state repression. Just as a side note, I've been going down this rabbit hole here on YouTube of police body camera footage. I don't suggest it for anyone, but it's interesting that he used that word, know the law, because so many people talk about, I know my rights. They don't. But I think it's more important to know what the law says, because your rights are what? Under the law. So I think it's more important to know what the law says as opposed to knowing what your rights are. Because, you got people who live in New York, for example. They're not supposed to have firearms.
Right.
And my thing is, if somebody is actually coming to kill you, what are you going to do? Are you going to write your congressperson? You're going to put together a petition on change.org, or are you going to do what you need to do if somebody's actually coming to kill you? It doesn't matter that the law says in New York you cannot carry arms. If what you've been talking about, Kali, is going to get worse, you need to figure out how to get out of New York City to train and then come back into New York City with your well-concealed gat. That's just my opinion, which I'm free to spout here on YouTube. Thank you very much.
While you can. And to reinforce
While
that
I
piece,
can.
I agree with David 100%. With the caveat of understanding that we are moving into an era where it's just pure power politics. But to where we are now, the law still applies in various scenarios in a limited way, and is actually being contested. This is a good part of what this whole piece is about. So what I stress again when I say, while you still have the ability to gather certain tools, do so. While you still have the ability to train, do so. While you still have the ability to assemble, do so. Because the trajectory they are on, these things are going to be curtailed, if not outright stopped soon. So utilize the time we have most clearly and most effectively to get organized and to set up our protocols for if and when they execute martial law, and understand Steve Miller, Steve Bannon have both themselves clearly articulated time and time again over the past 10 years, but over the past 4 years in particular, that this is the state that they aim to get to fully execute their vision, Project 2025 and beyond. They do not hold a vision which, at the end of the day, preserves the U.S. Constitution. And if you listen very carefully, going back to Trump's first term, he said that you can look it up when they did the kind of the phony 100-day, initial 100 days. He said that the Constitution got in the way. He said that then, right? And he clearly statements now, and some of the people around him apparently Trump is the Constitution, right? Meaning whatever that was just said last week by one of his folks. So whatever he says basically goes. This is where they are headed. So we got a particular window of opportunity. Let's put that to put some things in place, and I'm hoping that everybody who's listening utilizes that window most effectively.
I wouldn't ordinarily do this, but I'm going to go on and do it. Maybe we can take up a collection and hire international war criminal Eric Prince to provide protection for us. If China can hire Eric Prince on our African brothers in the DRC Congo, why can't we? I'm just putting it out there. If you don't want to answer it, you don't have to.
No, not all cases of my enemy's enemy is my friend. That's how I'm going to answer that one. There are reasons for being in the Congo do not adhere to at least my own personal vision of what a liberated Congo should entail. It will not entail resource extraction and using child labor so we can get the little precious metals to continue building cell phones and a whole bunch of other junk commodity items to put on the world market while the people of the Congo suffer.
Leah's saying Prester John is a long-time troll. I know that. I'm just saying, Khalid couldn't help it, but take it seriously. But
no,
I just threw that in there for levity.
Answer it seriously. We need to be mindful of why I answered in that particular way, because there's a whole degree of I would call it, let's call it a political debate that needs to be had more seriously, particularly in the time frame that we are now existing in, that we should be aiming and aligning ourselves with kind of this new multipolar world, right? And that we should be taking things like BRICS, far more seriously and allying ourselves with that. And I recognize BRICS for, I would argue, an institution like BRICS for what it is. It's a capitalist competitor. It's not an alternative, right? And I'm interested in building alternatives. Now, to the extent that their competition opens up more space for forces like us to operate within, cool, whatever the situation is. But I'm very clear that whether it's Chinese capitalism or whether it's Russian capitalism or whoever's capitalism, imperialism, at the end of the day, at least I think me and mine are going to be fighting it, right? So whoever wins out on becoming the next imperial hegemon, that's just the next force that the people on a global scale are going to have to fight against. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to parlay or do any form of concession or, alignment with U.S. imperialism, however sweetly dressed up it is. But, don't not getting confused and making something to be more than what it is. And the BRICS, as I said, it's a capitalist rival. It is not an alternative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely understood. Now, we spent, or should I say, you spent a long time laying out just a piece of what the dangers are that we face in terms of where we are and what is coming down the road. We didn't get into self-defense as much as I would have liked, but we've put in the chat the links to the documents that Kali referred to on his blog, Navigating the Storm, and also the other link, which I believe, where is that other link at? Where does that go to?
The Navigating the Storm, the Anarchist Library has it. There's several places that you can pull it down from.
And it's called Let Your Motto Be Resistance.
Right.
So and the links are in the chat.
Keep in mind again, that was written for a different set of circumstances. Right. I would argue that the basic kind of organizing perspectives are still helpful and still can be a guide to getting people started. That's why I put it out there. If I didn't believe it, I wouldn't have put it back out. Right. But what I will say, Thandi, what I think we should do is do a part 2 of this to go through that more concretely.
Absolutely. And it was put out in 2013. It's important that people understand that you, as well as others, have been thinking about doing this, have been writing about the need to do this, have in some way, shape, fashion, or form been doing this. It didn't just start in January this year, didn't start in November of last year. This is a 12-year-old document. So,
And the analysis part speaks to this point that we are at. In my view, I've been saying, anybody who knows me, follow my, scribblings over the last 20-something years. I was, I had the misfortune, if you would, of being at the Republican convention before the presidency was awarded to George W. Bush. Remember, he lost, right? He lost the popular vote, and it was Al Gore, as the vice president, was cemented his own defeat, right, with that 51-50 split, whatever. But it was the piece that brought me to this kind of consciousness was being there and seeing the level of discipline and lockstep nature that George W. Bush and his team had pulled together, and the determination that they had that whether they won the election or not, they were going to seize power. They made that clear on the floor while I was there.
And that's two different things. That's two different things.
Yeah, two different things.
Winning an election and seizing power.
Power, right?
Explosive P.
And so to me, I've been under the kick that, okay, the right is ready to seize power. They will use the trappings of bourgeois democracy to get there if need be. But should that fail, they have no gumption about just seizing power. And the nature of the empire does still require certain dimensions, or at least it did. Let's be clear. We may be getting into another piece. At least it did. It did require that what they call the international, rules-based framework that the United States was primarily the sole architect of. And so, folks, be clear. That's the United Nations and the Bretton Woods institutions, which are the World Bank, IMF, what used to be called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the GATT, that became the World Trade Organization, then a whole bunch of intermediary, regional human rights defending institutions and economic institutions, all fundamentally coordinated by the dominance of the U.S. dollar, right? And that being the backing mechanisms around financial stability and trade that got set up. That whole system, at least to that point, like on a domestic side, the Republicans, going back to George W. Bush and even before, were willing to break all the domestic rules to make sure that they could institute all the conditions to extract the maximum amount of profit with the minimum amount of resistance or compliance with Black people and other folks, which is why why Katrina went down the way it went down, right? Because there was no regard and no need to deal with us as a surplus population in any particular way that was going to expend excess resources of the empire for kind of domestic deployment. And it was better to just let us die or suffer or go away than waste resources in the context of their need, perhaps like in war, for other deployment. Let's be clear about what really went down and what happened. But that world order was still contingent upon rules of the game being followed and adhered to. Trump came along, right? And the forces behind Trump. So it ain't just him solely as an individual. You're talking about people like Peter Thiel. If you don't know who that is, go and look him up. Y'all think Elon Musk is bad? Study Peter Thiel. Now that's Elon Musk's homeboy. They called the PayPal Mafia, and the Mafia not for just joking reasons. Peter Thiel is the one who basically made J.D. Vance. So Vance is not there because just Trump liked him. He's there because there's a signal and alignment with that particular section of the ruling class, the tech lords. The tech lords do not believe in democracy. They want to create, right, the basically what used to be called like company towns, right? They want to create these zones where corporations basically like his can just rule, right? And if that doesn't work, they want to create basically a monarchy, right? And the these are things from what they say. I would, folks, if you, one of the better pieces that summarize some of this, check out this piece from Naomi Klein and Astra Taylor, "The Rise of End Times Fascism." Everybody check that out, because it's critical to understand what the enemies who are at the helm, who are pushing the buttons, who have control over the nuclear codes, what they believe, what they think, how they move, what they're aiming to accomplish, right? What is the end game, right? And this is the piece. This is the piece where we go back, that flood the zone, right? And we're going back to that question. The flood the zone piece keeps us distracted on chasing shadows. This is the end game, and we got to be clear and clear-headed about that. And then the other piece, we need to be very clear on, that we got to be real on. The Democrats and the liberals do not have an alternative, which is why consistently they are going to lose, right? Because there's nothing that they can point to in their so-called, opposition or resistance, to the extent that they are posing any. They don't have an alternative other than going back to the status quo. And keep in mind, it was the failure of the status quo and the conditions that it enabled that brought us, the rise of the fascists. So a real alternative is going to have to be posed, and it's not coming from them. We need to be clear on that. Very clear. So check this out. Thandi, we're going to need to do a part 2 on this, before the month is out. We'll make a commitment to everybody watching.
Before the month is out? You want to do it in August?
I think we need to do it in August, because I think trying to keep pace with where we're trying to go. Because part of the thing, let me say this to the audience. What I was hoping to do in terms of providing a scaffolding with this series, I haven't ever fully been able to do. And not because it had been on my mind, and not because, I don't think that the theory is not prepared. It's prepared enough. I've been trying to speak, particularly the last 2 or 3, to bring in the the realities of how things are moving, so folks can see the need for something like the build and fight theory in real time. So that's why when we had on, Raphael last month, talking about social digital infrastructure, we talked about, again, kind of more what we opposed and the reality of what we need to build and how to build it. So all of these kind of, I think, deserve a part two, but this one I think is more pressing than some of the other ones, because it's going to be a much more immediate piece of our ability to speak freely. We may not have this ability within a year's time. That is a reality we need to confront it and deal with openly. Now, even if that doesn't exist, we need to learn from other examples around the world of how, when authoritarian dictatorships got set up, what did people do to fight back and defeat them? Latin America, damn near every single country you can look at in the 20th century had some variant or some form of this. All of the reactionary ones being basically pushed and promoted, or if not supported, by the United States government, right? And in all those cases, things had to go deeply underground, but they never fully extinguished, their resistance. And while the resistance, never fully overthrow those dictatorships, they were able to organize enough that when some of the needs of the empire changed, folks were in a position to push just enough to change the conditions so there could be some kind of nominal restoration of democracy, right? And the most glaring examples of that are Chile, right, and how that dictatorship technically ended in 1990. And I say technically because the Pinochet, stepped down from power basically, but he remained the general and commander of the armed forces until 1998, right? So he was still the behind the scenes power for all that time. Similar thing happened in Brazil when their junta, their dictatorship, right wing dictatorship, ended in '85, right? Similar conditions. So we need to really start studying the lessons, from Latin America and other places where similar things happened and what people did to get themselves out, what they did right, what they did wrong. And there's still plenty of people around, a good number of them live in the United States, folks who fled those dictatorships. That yes, there is a Latin American right wing force that exists in this country, but there's also a Latin American left wing a set of assortment of forces that exist, particularly in places like L.A., San Francisco, New York, that we need to tap into. And if y'all can get a hold of folks, start getting a hold of folks, learning. And then there's a good number of books and a good number of documentaries and movies to really pick up and start learning from. And I would encourage people to do that because that is where we are headed. And if you look at the case of Chile, that was a dictatorship from 73 to 1990, so almost 20 years. I don't think we want to suffer that long. So, let's take this seriously and figure out in the proper context what are the different ways we're going to have to organize, and then put in context the different shift. That is why we have to keep up with international affairs and international conditions, right? Because let's be clear, even though Trump and them are trading with China, they openly talk about going to war with China in the same breath, right? And they are very clear that both sides are just buying time for the final day when that goes down, right? And we need to be very clear about where we stand on all this. What kind of constrictions did that put on movement? What type of opportunities that put on movement? And where can we begin to intervene to create a real alternative? So I think we want to do this for a number of different reasons before this month is out. It's going
as soon as possible.
I think we need to do it.
All right, so we'll come up with a date and we will lock in that date. Please continue to support Black Liberation Media, continue to support Jackson Rising, continue to support Rootwork. Subscribe so that you will know when part 2 will be coming. Subscribe so that you will get that notification. You will get that email. You get that bell, whatever it is that you get to let you know, hey, it's going down on this day. Hey, it's going down in 30 minutes. Hey, we on live. Like, share, and subscribe.
And Saturn,
Continue.
everybody, put your questions in. I go back and read all the questions. So even after the video, you can go on the Jackson Rising YouTube page. You can continue to put questions in there. Myself and other comrades who work with us, that we all go through at various points in time. So if there's a question that you can't formulate or others, please put it in there because these all help us get to where we need to go. So I appreciate all the questions. Thank y'all and look forward to the next one.
If we don't get to it, if Khalid doesn't get to it live, he will get to it. So again, like, share, subscribe. Please donate. Donate to keep Black Liberation Media on. Donate to the work that Cooperation Jackson is doing, continues to do. Again, this document is from 2013. So folks didn't just pop up. You know what I'm saying? Didn't just pop up this year. Been doing this for a while. I want to make sure I acknowledge all the folks in the chat who have come through, who have stayed with us, who have engaged, who have commented, etc. Y'all, okay, so it's what time is it? Out here in LA, it is 5:34. 90 minutes, y'all who are not new to this channel, y'all know. It's about time that Mr. Arthritis made himself known. Mr. Arthritis, Mr. Ritis is knocking on the door. So I'm going to go and get out of here.
Appreciate you as always, Tanya. Thanks, everybody.
Again, we put links in the chat to the articles that were referenced. We put links in the chat to the documents that were referenced. And if you have a question that was not answered live, again, go on and leave a comment and folks will get back to you. I promise they will get back to you. All right. All right. So thank you again, Kali. Let's put our heads together about a date for part 2. And let's do that. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for hanging with us. Thank you for your support. And we will catch y'all on the next one.